What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for turning to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Steven Thompson. It's great to have you here for another edition of the Inside Pitt Practice Report coming to you from the South Side after practice number 13 of Pitt training camp. Today was a big day, ACC Network Day at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. The ACC Network contingent of EJ Manuel, former Florida State quarterback, Mark Richt, former Miami head coach, Wes Durham and Kelsey Riggs, a couple analysts and hosts from the ACC network, visited Pittsburgh today. They spent their day on the sidelines of Pitt practice. They talked to us a little bit as well, and that's kind of where I want to start with the conference's flagship television station in town for the day. I want to talk a little bit about perception around the league. This was a conversation that we had with Rick and Durham, guys who know the ACC well, have been around the league, who've talked to a lot of people, and have also covered Pitt pretty closely over the years. Just about what the league thinks of Pitt and the level of respect, quite honestly, that the Panthers get as a member of this league, going on close to a decade now. This is their ninth year in the league, or I believe 10th year in the league total. It is their ninth football season. So we talked a little bit with them about that, and I think Pitt definitely has some believers at the ACC network. And I remember a similar thing from last year where there were tons of questions surrounding this team, how they were going to place so and so, how they were going to place all the changing things on or the moving parts on offense, and even on defense as well. Just tons of guys going to the NFL, which is to be expected after you have a couple of successful teams. But like from 2021 to 2022, there wasn't as big a drop off as I think many expected. And talking to Durham and Rick, they both believed that that'll be the case again this year, that there won't be as big a drop off as many expect, because the Panthers have a track record of being able to replace guys like that. Now, this could just be bluster from a conference partner who's, a bunch of people who are guests at the facility for a day. They're just, looking to say some nice things about the program and move on. You can read it that way, but I think this stuff is genuine. And I think Pitt fans can really take this genuinely, that there are people out there on a bigger stage with a bigger platform that are pushing somewhat of the same narrative that people around the program, people within the program, and people who root for the program especially have been trying to put forth as well, and that the Panthers deserve a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. You can look just under Pat Narduzzi's tenure, which I believe is the relevant, coming on. He's been here for 8 years. This will be his ninth year. That's almost a decade. But under Narduzzi, the Panthers have just one losing season overall, just two seasons with win totals under 8, excluding the COVID year. They have 2 division titles and a conference title. Only Clemson, North Carolina, and Pitt have been to the conference title game multiple times since Pat Narduzzi took over here. And then the Tigers and the Panthers are the only ones to have won an outright league title, and that's on top of 3 first-round draft picks, NFL draft picks over the past 2 years. I'm going to count Jordan Addison in there. He was a top 10 draft. He was a first-round draft pick talent when he left Pitt, and he was still a first-round draft talent after his season at USC. So I'm going to give Pitt the nod for developing him and for getting him to that point. You think about his growth from his freshman to sophomore year, I think that speaks for itself. USC can claim if we want, but I think that Pitt deserves their credit there as well. But still, in addition to those 3 first-round draft picks, there are 11 more draft picks over the past 3 years to make it 14 overall from the past 3 years. That ties Clemson for the most in the conference. And I say all this just to reiterate that I'm buying what Durham and Richt, and then even Narduzzi and the rest of his staff are selling, that Pat Narduzzi might tell us that he flip-flops a little bit. Will sometimes tell us that, he doesn't care about rankings, doesn't care about where he is in the AP poll, where he is in the media poll, and things like that. But he did tell us at Media Day that there are some teams that earn the benefit of the doubt over his team when they might not have earned it, when Pitt has beaten them. I think that was a nod at Media Day directly to Miami, who was picked one spot ahead of Pitt, but as we remember, Pitt blew them out in Miami's house last year. It was 42-16, I believe was the final score, something around there. But Pitt beat them extremely soundly, and I think he sees when Miami and North Carolina State are picked ahead of Pitt in things like the AP poll, or the preseason poll, the conference preseason poll, year after year after year, with results that don't stack up. He sees that as disrespect, and I think it's not just him. It's like I said, these people at the ACC network who are who play a part in controlling the narratives around this team and their place in this conference, who see the rest of the league as maybe not paying as much attention to the kind of high floor outfit. And I think that's the word I always come back to when I want to describe Pat Narduzzi's program and the things that he's built at Pitt, is that this is a high floor outfit. More often than not, you are going to get 8 wins and 4 losses in the regular season with a chance to get 9 in the bowl game. That's been statistically, historically, the result year after year after year. That's what Pat Narduzzi has created at Pitt. That's the teams that he's had, and there's little reason to expect that that'll change in the near future. And that's not just kind of Pitt being optimistic about what could come, but it's a track record. It's history. It's Pitt being able to replace guys like Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver and Kalijah. I guess we don't know yet about Kalijah Cansey, but being able to win 9 games when taking only a two game hit when a guy like Kenny Pickett, a Heisman finalist, ACC Player of the Year, leaves for the NFL. That wasn't the kind of drop off that I think many expected for Pitt last year. And until I see something dramatically different, and that's not completely ruling it out this year, that I'm not going to expect it. I'm not going to bet on it. And Rick and Durham aren't betting on it either. They told us very point blank that there's no reason that Pitt can't be that third best team in the ACC. They're definitely in that conversation for the tier behind Clemson and Florida State, who are the obvious conference title favorites this year. But they also said that, if some things shake their way, if they get a couple breaks, the Panthers could be in that top 1 or 2 conversation. They could make it back to Charlotte, even under this new ACC title game format. So I think for as much as Pitt fans and people around the program want to complain about kind of the lack of respect that they maybe get within the conference and nationally, they can feel comfortable knowing that they have at least a couple of friends at the ACC network. We'll move on to a little bit of real football here. Like I said yesterday in my practice report, it's been all offense, at least talking to people and getting reports from scrimmages and team drills and things like that. The passing game, and in particular, has really been what's highlighted our conversations with players and coaches. But today it was all defense. We had to talk to Randy Bates, defensive coordinator, and then linebackers Bengali Kamara and Shane Simon. And I want to start with what we got from our conversations with them about the defensive line and Bates in particular. Pat Narduzzi identified Tyler Bentley, David Green, Devin Danielson, Sean Fitzsimmons, Dayon Hayes, Nikai Johnson, and Nate Temple as guys who are really standing out along the defensive line, and they feel they still have the depth there without maybe some of the star power just yet, especially considering what they lost in the NFL draft and team in the transfer portal with John Morgan heading out to head to Arkansas. But there's one guy that Bates in particular and Pat Narduzzi identified as a guy who's really grown. This is an older guy. My roster right here. He's a 5th-year senior, a redshirt senior. That's DeAndre Jules, defensive lineman number 90. This is a guy that we got a little bit more detail about from Randy Bates. Bates said that he is more athletic. He's lost some weight, but he's become a real pain to block for the offensive line and has just transformed his body in a way that has made him much more prepared to take on a bigger role. He said point blank, this guy's going to play a lot of football for us this year. He's going to be a force in the middle of the defense. And, it's just another testament to what we were talking about before. The Panthers believe that they're one of the best in the country at developing players. They like to recruit high school players. They like to keep them in the program. And if Jules does play out, if his final season as a Panther does play out the way that it seems like Bates and Narduzzi think that it will, it'll be another feather in their cap for that kind of player development and, kind of long view of recruiting that this team and these coaches have. We can move on to linebacker a little bit too. This is obviously a big point of conversation with Kamara and Shane Simon, 2 guys who, along with Solomon Shields and Brandon George, are right in that mix to start. They've kind of got 4 guys that Narduzzi has labeled the starters. These are the names we know. These are the big names. These are guys that I've talked about before who will at the very least play each and every one of them. I believe they're going to rotate these guys in pretty handily, especially given the way all of them have been cross training and playing different positions. There will be room for all of them to make an impact this year, regardless of who starts. I feel pretty comfortable predicting that Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara will be your money and your star, respectively. And then Shane Simon seems like the early leader for the Mike spot, although that's not a guarantee. Brandon George, if he doesn't get that starting spot, well, he's rotated heavily, like I said, but he is not out of that starting job race. But the real, I felt like, meat of our conversations with Simon and Randy Bates, especially, was about the young guys. Thinking especially about Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Jordan Bass, and Braylon Lovelace. They've been really impressing their coaches and their fellow players in practices. Lewis is, basically a freshman still. He was hurt for almost all of last year with various injuries. And then Biles, Bass, and Lovelace are all true freshmen, but they are really impressed with these guys and how they've come along since the beginning of camp, and since at least Lovelace stepped in during spring practices, and then Lewis getting his first action in spring ball as well. Could these guys play a lot this year? Like I said, it's real crowded at the top between these really old guys who are, four guys competing for three starting spots. So you can't say that any of these guys really have a ton of chance to play a lot of defense right away, special teams especially. But I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is looking ahead towards the future and looking towards what these guys can be. Uh, you know, I remember hearing from Pat Narduzzi in the spring, and then I asked Ryan Manilek, the linebackers coach, about this on media day at the beginning of training camp. Pat Narduzzi said that Manilek felt that the room was thin, that they didn't have enough bodies, is the word he used. I asked Manilek, and he clarified that he just wanted guys to step up, but that still illustrates that Manilek wasn't super confident in what this room had in spring ball, but he really saw some guys take some step forward, especially lower down in the kind of predicted depth chart without one officially out yet. So I think it's significant that we keep hearing about guys like Lovelace, who Narduzzi said during the spring was a guy who looked ready to play right away as a true freshman. And then Biles and Bass have been real impressive with their athleticism. Kyle Lewis has got two takeaway stickers on his helmet and has clearly been making some real strides. That was a guy who came, I think Lewis especially came really under the radar, and Lovelace as well was maybe not a guy that people expected to make an impact or make this kind of impression right away, but they really have. And that should be encouraging to look forward into the future. Because like I said, this was a position that the coaches, especially Manelik, were not super confident about, kind of looking in the long term with a long term view on things. So with that all in mind, Bates also said to check back after the weekend. They'll have another scrimmage on Saturday where they'll learn a lot about how the depth shakes out, not just at linebacker and defensive line, but in the secondary as well, as he's got an ongoing competition at safety there too. He's got some guys he likes, but he wants to see how the rest of the depth really shakes out. With that, that's all I've got for today. I'm headed out to Latrobe, Pennsylvania tomorrow for the final day of Steelers training camp. We'll be closing it out there. I'll be there with. That's all we got for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another Inside Pitt Practice Report. I'll be back on Friday. Tomorrow, Thursday, I'm headed out to Latrobe, Pennsylvania for the final day of Steelers camp out at St. Vincent College. So I'll be wrapping things up there with my boss, Noah Strackbine. Follow us on YouTube for our Steelers coverage. That's youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. And then follow us our training camp reporting at allsteelers.com. I'll be back with another Inside Pitt practice report on Friday. Have you covered there before the Steelers actually take on the Buffalo Bills at home. I'll be there for the preseason game at Acrisure Stadium. So make sure you tune into all our coverage from football training camp across Pittsburgh, across college, and the professional ranks. But until next time, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, like this video. That's youtube.com/Inside the Panthers. And then follow our Pitt reporting from training camp at InsideThePanthers.com. So until next time, thanks everyone.